Hello everybody. This video today is actually some WhatsApp messages that me and James were having. I didn't put mine in, but I put James's in. And I actually got in touch with him the other day because I was saying, "Oh James, are you going to do another little video for us?" And obviously I had a few domestics, which is, we're talking around that, but that's the way it is, I suppose, in life. And James is still going to make me my videos, and I said, James, you kind of said enough already. I can, what you're talking about here, I can put into a video. And then James talked for nearly another 20 minutes after that. And it's good to know. I can tell by his voice that he's quite happy. So me and Mickey are sitting here, aren't we, Mickey?
Yeah.
Oh yes, Mickey, you have to have this near you, otherwise they never hear anything you say.
Well, I haven't heard any complaints so far.
I don't hear what you say. I want to hear what you say, Mickey.
No, I've got nothing to say.
What did you think of what James said as a round
I think it's
thing?
fantastic. I think it's fantastic. Even everything you were saying is very knowledgeable. Very useful. Yeah.
The thing is, I've met James.
I know.
He stayed here for a while. Yeah. At a time where it was just almost as bad as it's been lately, but
yeah, he was in a bad place.
We managed to get here, and I've got my boiler now.
Yeah. Oh God, yes.
Yeah.
The luxury of life, eh?
Oh, it's still like, we've got hot water. It's always like, oh my God, we've got hot water. But anyway, yeah, so let's hear James. The rest is James, and all James's thoughts. I kind of agree with a lot of the things he says. And I think he agreed with a few of my things if you listen to him, what he says, but as a response. But anyway, let's get on with James. Thank you, James.
Thank you, James.
Hi, Karen. Yeah, unfortunately, it's that hurt people hurt, so they project out what's actually something they don't want to face inside themselves. Yeah, spiritual meaning of a hornet. I hadn't come across that meaning. I normally I just type in what is the spiritual meaning for whatever the thing is, and then I look across 5 or 6, just the opening lines without actually clicking on the different websites, and just take what feels right for you out of it. It's certainly a really good sign, from what I can remember. I think it's a pretty good one to get. Hopefully I can make the video today where we've had the reservoir drain itself on a T-junction. It's no fun carrying 45 litres of water. It's alright carrying the empty bottles, but then when you're coming back from the cave, when they're full of water, the maximum really can carry is 6. But it's not even a straight, even path to walk along. It's because of the wild boar, they do a lot of damage. They just go in a particular direction. They just like move anything out of the way. So there's rocks and boulders. That's a recent phenomenon apparently over the last couple of years. So they're a foraging animal. So I would imagine that development or something has sort of driven them away from where they were. So they've settled on this area. They do sort of like a regular pattern, but we've got Buddy look at them, and it's pretty good deterrent. Yeah, so the watering situations, it is really life or death on a daily basis to some of these plants because of this intensity of the sun. But we're in a time of great changes, and it's really you can't carry anyone. Each has got to do for themselves, and from the communication I've had with trees in the form of timber, which is like a coma state, the consistent message from what is now furniture, because is that a lot of people will they have this affinity with trees, and oh, next lifetime I want to come back and be a tree. Well, that's already been through that. And the message is, well, when you see a tree, you're looking at the success story. I mean, if you take an oak tree and consider how many acorns that one tree will produce year in, year out, how many of those acorns actually then go on to be an oak tree themselves? Certainly if they're too close, they won't take, because trees don't overcrowd themselves like this system does with humans, and sort of forcing them into stacked up tower blocks and things. So if you look at nature, and then look at man's lower mind and how it's trying to overcome nature and seeing it as an obstacle instead of working with it. With each progression in problem solving from the lower conscious, it's been at the expense of a connection to nature. But we haven't totally lost it, and this is just a massive filtering system. The system does it with education and selecting, oh, that one's we can use, that one's useful to the system, that one's can be taken out with a drug addiction, and so on. So there's always a filtering, and I've theorised that star forts were some sort of filtering of water. And water is the common theme that sort of links everything anyway. It's a life giver for everything that's living. And this whole thing of giving your sort of waste liquids back to the system so they can then chemically treat them and then give them back to you again. It's like it's going directly back to nature where it actually does some good. And it helps to create good compost. This is what people used to do in the sort of Victorian era, where you dig a hole and then you'd have your earth toilet on top, and then you'd move it. And that first year, I think you sort of just leave that soil. The second year you grow flowers, and the third year you can actually grow veg on it. So you've got this rotation going on. And that's in the good old days before the days of artificial fertilizers, which have progressively been causing problems. In the short term, it looks like, oh yeah, use the artificial fertilizer and it's increasing the yield, but because the soil is getting so depleted, and now it's got to the stage where the artificial fertilizer really doesn't cut it, and it's like there's something seriously wrong when you're having to use an artificial product to try and kickstart nature. That just shows how the intense industrial farming methods don't work. And it's a typical pattern to pretty much everything in the way this life is geared up. I'm going to be talking more about the metaphysical and the psychology side, using Anton Bruckner as an example, because he is an atypical artist from the point of view of fame came posthumously. But there's far more in it, and there's all the metaphysical to it. And I found a few more channels that are talking about Wagner's ring cycle in that same perspective, because it's not many characters, it's one character, and it's all an internal story of what goes on inside each of us. So it when you sort of change the perspective, how you come at these things, everything changes in a positive way. But yeah, I'll get a little voice message, sort of 10 minutes or so, and then put something together for you. And then yeah, so I think I'm gonna have a relaxing day today, not do a lot. It's as much as anything else, there's sort of lessons. You're being presented with potentially negative projections from those other people. They're projecting out, so it's okay. handle the situation differently. And it's about breaking the cycle. I'm saying this because I hope it's going to help you, but I didn't want to say it publicly because it sort of moves into more personal things. But I'd rather talk in broad landscapes so people can say, well, yeah, that I can relate to that because in my life this or that happens. And this whole system is about getting us into routines. This is what school and work and everything is. And you notice how they make all these things as boring and mundane as possible, stripped of any excitement or any real value. But when you sort of see it from this metaphysical perspective, it certainly changes. And it's how you feel about things by coming at with a different perspective. The analogy I like to use is that still life, the fruit bowl, and then you've got four painters. Let's say they're sitting at the cardinal points of north, east, south, and west. So the one on the one side will have a perspective where that fruit bowl would appear to be predominantly a pineapple and I don't know, bananas. But then the observer from the opposite side is going to say, no, there's more oranges and apples in this bowl. And they're looking at the same thing, but they've got a different perspective. And this is very much with this reality as well. And look at the way most people over the last 3 years, what they're believing, what they're focusing on. Again, it comes back to what dominates that living room. Why do they call it a living room when you spend so little time in it, when most of the activities are elsewhere, i.e. work or school? So the living room is really just sort of like a couch potato vegetation room, and also the programming. And of course television program has the spelling of program as ME on the end. So what is it programming? Whereas a program for a computer doesn't have the ME on the end of the spelling, because that's programming a device. But the media, which is the medium of this system, is this materialism, is trying to program us to accept a narrative. So it actually becomes a fascinating thing to sort of be observer. It's almost like you've got to get out your body and go and stand behind yourself and observe yourself in so you become like a third party to yourself. Actually, that's interesting as well. I've not actually thought of it in this terms. Think about a marriage. You need permission, and then you get a certificate. So because you're bringing in a third party, a materialistic third party, in that particular sense. But if we become the third party of ourselves, then that changes everything as well. I've not actually put it in those words before, but that's what I found to be the case. First off, we could break the etymology. The subject of repeats is a very interesting one. First off, we could break the etymology of the word down. Nature's natural sponge. You'd have peat bogs that when you have torrential rain, is nature's natural sponge. You'd have peat bogs that when you have torrential rain, they would absorb the water and you don't get waterlogged fields. So when we look at the word collecting, it's coming round again. The system uses repeats in a way that it becomes programming, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. When something becomes second nature, for example, learning to drive, and where driving a vehicle, you then don't even have to consciously think them. And you'll see this with many people. They'll hold a conversation while they're driving a car, and the driving skill has become second nature. So it's not all bad with repeats in that sense. But obviously, what is classed as learning is programming through repetition. And you'll see the same use of repetition and so on. But there's another thing with repeats, and that comes down to that when we turn it inwards. Why does it keep happening to me? Run with the premise that everything external of you is a reflection of yourself. And then observe, well, if something keeps happening to me, there's something that's actually trying to guide me. Although I may judge it initially as being negative, there is a lesson to be learned in the thing. And it's very much about breaking pattern. This is something Jason of Archaics talks about, and you'll find that history does repeat itself. So if we take the year 1902, which is one of those Phoenix years, if we go back to 1848, 1849, so we've gone back 52 years, you have the Dresden Uprising. So the theme there is Central Europe, civil unrest, protests about the control system, which is crushed by the Prussian and Saxon forces and restore the hierarchical order and control of things. Now, if we go from 1902 and we go forward 52 years, you come to the Hungarian uprising. Same or very similar events. Central Europe, civil unrest, protests about authoritarian measures, and ultimately it was crushed. So that's one example of a repeat. But what happens when we turn it inwards and then consider is all about breaking the pattern, which breaks the cycle, what is called the generational sins of man. So if we the habits and the patterns of the previous generation, which is trying to mold the new addition to the family to be a projection of their unfulfilled wishes rather than being an individual to find their own way in life and find their own purpose and reason for being in life, then that is a cycle, a repeat. And you'll see it obviously expressed in the medical world, you see it expressed in the media world, particularly the television, where you have repeats. But ultimately, everything is a repeat that is given in the Bible. And see it from the psychological perspective that there is only one character playing all the parts. And then you compare that with, say, Wagner's Ring Cycle, and pretty much every film, every book, every story is just variations on a theme. It is basically all repeats. But it's whether we can see the deeper meaning for the superficial surface meaning to a story. A perfect example of there is only one character. They are all aspects of Zorro, the lion, and the Tin Man are all aspects of one. And if that can be applied in the way you read anything like the Bible, it actually becomes a very good guide. It also comes down to the message that's given by trees in nature. One of being impartial, one of being neutral, and just seeing things for what they are. People wish for justice, but it's about seeing that it just is the way it is, and having that discernment without having the emotional roller coaster that all these little scenarios in the reality are trying to emit from us to get us to react and draw a negative energy from. Over yourself, it's really your higher conscious taking control of your lower conscious rather than being pulled in this direction or that direction through impulses, through animalistic instincts, and being able to master your own thoughts and your own feelings, not suppressing them, but acknowledging that they're there, but knowing how to deal with those feelings so it doesn't come out in a negative way as hurt, because hurt people will hurt. It is all an outward projection of what is going on inside of oneself. The story of life is about you as an individual that's listening to this, for you to find out the I am within you. So if you are having repeat scenarios, repeat things that repeat in your life, you're saying to yourself, why does this keep happening to me? The reason it is happening is because you are creating it. You are not realizing and having that discernment to see that things are happening over and over again until you break the pattern. It is all to do with the spiritual growth. When you can sort of take this objective view and see life in this way, it actually makes more sense that we do have a purpose. We're not here as some random series of events, and we're certainly not the physical body. We are far more than that is contained within a physical body in which to move about in the physical world. I would say the lesson, or what's been presented to you, is reflected in the material world as the B&B, the bed and breakfast. It implies rest and renewed energy. The real B&B that affects us the most really is the what's the word I'm looking for here? Hold on. The thought's gone. It can almost feel it drain out the mind. It's sort of sunk back down again because I've allowed thinking to come in. I've created an electrical circuit instead of letting it just flow. Yeah, so the B&B, it's really balance and boundaries. So on the one hand you have the balance, so you have the benevolence and the kindness and the giving without expectation of something in return coming from the heart. But at the same time, that can be an open door where people will use you as a doormat. So you have to have the boundaries as well. It's expressed with people putting up fences, and this is my land, and it goes as far as here. Well, in the metaphysical, we have to create that boundary around ourselves as to what we'll allow into our world, acceptable to us and what is unacceptable to us. So, for example, I don't watch films, really, because I can't watch films, because I can't help but start seeing deeper levels to it, and it's not as it once was, where it's lazy entertainment.
James.
It now works in a different way. Horror films that desensitize and are designed to create a series of shocks. If you think of this in terms of like electrical components, too many shocks can be very damaging. And I feel this whole thing with fireworks is another prime example, not just affecting nature, but affecting us with this. When you get those sudden bangs, how do you feel? It's not a. And then you've even got the people thrill-seeking sort of. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but I would also keep in balance. So it's like your physical body is not going to endure a lifetime of continuous going on and off of roller coasters. It's going to have an adverse effect because there's no balance if you were to keep doing that same activity. So yeah, balance and boundaries, that's the real B&B, and I'd say that's a lesson that everybody gets presented with. It's like, okay, but it's just like the world is a stage, and the same thing come in a new stage setting. And if you think of if you were to walk in the town and you hear two people talking, that's like an inviting script. Do you want to then join in with that conversation? This is where you have to be the discerning actor on the world stage and say, I'm not going to appear in a soap. I'm a much better actor. I'm a quality actor. And if you're going to be an actor on a world stage, well, surely the best thing to go for is to play a star role. And there are so many archetypes throughout this thing called history, because that's all they really are. They are archetypes to either emulate or discern the good aspects, the bad aspects, what to avoid. And again, it comes down to balance and boundaries again. So I hope that helps. I could turn that one into a voicemail for recording, because I'm not going to say anything that has a personal context unless you'd wish me to, so I'm not going to mention George or Ellie or anything like that. Like I say, it's talking in the broader terms, and hopefully people will get something out of it that will benefit them. If we get one that it helps, then that's job done. And love to Mickey, by the way. I mean to say this every time and always forget, but the intention is there, even if I don't vocalise it. Karen, I thought I'd just play the first message and then reply to that rather than having play it all the way through. The thing to remember is hurt people hurt. They project out, not necessarily acknowledging what is actually frustrating inside them, but they project outwards in the hope that it alleviates how they feel inside themselves. The thing is to not take any of it personally, but the other thing to remember is, as physical beings, like everything else in this reality, it's finite. So your currency is where you spend your time and what you spend your time on. And this is where the balance and boundaries come in. This is quite common with people who are dying, or if they're in pain, or with cancer or something, or dementia. They certainly, when people get older, they go through these. I've actually seen an old man launch his wheeled Zimmer frame across the floor in an old people's home, basically trying to play Skittles with one of the other residents. So just kick off sometimes. It's sad. It's this barbaric society, and of course we know what the problems are. It's the process and the medication. I don't know if you realise that when you look on packets of food and it tells you the nutritional values in cooked form, but when the things are cooked, that's not the right figures. So they always tell you these half-truths with these things. And the other thing is they're very sneaky to reclassify something as part of the manufacturing process rather than classing it as an ingredient, although it's still there and it is affecting the other ingredients. So hypothetically, it's like, oh, we're filter grain through mercury, but we won't call mercury an ingredient. We class it as a manufacturing process, so we don't have to mention it. That's the sort of the way the system works. But yeah, we're in this Pluto transit. It destroys all that is untrue. So probably what is happening, you're getting sort of little presentations of things, and so the stresses do fall away. I'm so pleased that you've got a boiler now and you can have a bath again. That must have been awful. We've got a water reservoir which is gravity fed from the source, which is about a half-hour walk. And the weak point was its T-junction, and of course it went the other Friday last week. So it's since walking to the cave, which I'm getting a bit concerned that water level's dropping now. But I've just hauled up 34. It's a windy, twisty path. The wild boars have caused all sorts of damage and sort of churned up the pathway. So it's not an easy walk either. But I thought I'll get it done because I'm here on my own today. Keith and Go have gone off to the beach. It's nice. I'm just going to relax. I think I may do a bit of collecting leaves for mulch. Keith asked me to go and get some more bamboo, but I'll see how I feel because I'm not going to knacker myself. Always got to keep in mind, without worrying about it, a twisted ankle. I'm prone to tearing. I've torn the ligaments in my right ankle several times, and it's no joke. It's then like really got to keep your leg up for 2 weeks, but that's just not practical, and it gets uncomfortable. But it's roughly every 10 years I've managed to tear it, but it's painful, and the ankle swells out like the size of the calf. So you can imagine what that's like. So size where you had a twisted ankle. Fortunately, it sounds like you haven't torn any ligaments, that's a plus point. So all these things are set to try us. They're all little tests. That's why the system had the thing of mandatory testing. It's a sort of twisted reflection of a truth, taken down a material route. But everything in life is really a test upon us one way or another. It's just how we perceive it and what feelings we get inside. So it's not like the medication route of suppressing something. So if you feel triggered or angry, it's like that's the time it's like, oh, I acknowledge that feeling. Now, why am I feeling like that? It's always an inside job with all of these things. I mean, even the system, it's an inside job in the corrupt sense. But my life has definitely taken a beautiful step forward. It's been a fantastic learning curve since March, since coming here. Yeah, something I was going to make is a video. I got sent a video. If you could have a Groundhog Day and repeat one day over and over again, my answer would be today. And I'd probably say the same thing again tomorrow, but it won't be applied to today. It'll be about that day. But it's that thing, life is what you make it, really. But then we get all these scenes and characters come into our lives for this purpose. It's to spiritually grow. I mean, basically the Bible, it's just one part. They're just anthropomorphized into people that people take literally and think is a literal history. But nothing could be further than the truth. Take, for example, a modern day equivalent. If you look at Poland, now find an old map and look at it when it was Prussia, you'll see that the place names are completely different, but it's the same land. It's exactly what's been done with the Middle East. They've applied the place names to structures and cities and things that were there that probably had completely different names, annihilate the population, basically like the Bolshevik Revolution, because history just repeats over and over. Because it certainly looks more, well, as far as I'm concerned, it's the remnants of the culture of Atlantis. When you get talk of monks and priests and things going out, like in South America, the whole Quetzalcoatl and Amaru is the same mythical being that was benevolent and showed people how to cultivate, how to grow, how to irrigate, this sort of thing, introduced writing. And you can see the same pattern. And the giveaway is the Irish round towers. You'll find them in Florida, you'll find them in India, nothing even further in the Far East. The common denominator, or the centre point, is Ireland. They're sort of unique to that sort of culture, which I'd say is the remnants of Atlantis. So Tara Hill, which is protected by the UK government, not by the Irish government, which is interesting. You're not allowed to dig, obviously, because there's obviously something below the ground, like all these follies on golf courses. It's like grass it over and come out with some bullshit story that they tell us as history. But yeah, it's basically the priest class they're the only ones that could read rewritten history and flipped everything over. So this is why you've got mirrors, like you have a Gulf War, but then you have the Gulf of Mexico. And the war has been on annihilating a civilization that lived in harmony by the looks of it. And then the cultural side got moved to Tara Hill, which would a cross and a serpent. That's consistent all around the world, and it's the same group, this church of Isa Christos, which is still the God's Christ. This is why they've come down so hard on Ireland, and that's why there was one English Pope, I think Gregory, in 1199. It's the time of Henry II, so they coerced England to then turn on Ireland, which had never been an enemy, and hence Cromwell as well, and Olaf of Norway converting to Christianity, and also the so-called Viking invasions. It was to eliminate this church so the Vatican could basically take over. And the Vatican have got a policy of if you don't agree with them and submit to them, they just burn everything. They still do it to this day in one form or another. Last message. Yeah, if you can use any of the thing and turn it into a video, please feel free to do so. Yeah, you're quite right. You're not responsible. It's all about taking personal responsibility. So it's a funny thing, because in this realm, the system programs us to be a certain way, and you sort of look in the mirror ourselves. We just see this outer shell, and then a lot of people aren't happy with their outer shell. They want to modify it with plastic surgery or whatever, go to extremes or Botox injections. And I always think of the Red Hot Chili Pepper song, was it Californication? It's like, celebrity skin, is that your chin, or is that war you're waging to dispel aging? Yeah, it is very much about taking personal responsibility, but most people, it's their ego will come out to defend. But it is an outward projection. I get him, he's really angry inside himself. But like a lot of people, they won't face the real thing inside them that's bugging them, and of course it projects it outwards. But there's no shortcuts with any of this. The pathway is narrow. It's expressed in the Bible that it's easier to get a camel through the eye of a needle than a rich man. I think it's the same. But the camel has a hump. It's like it's basically all the things we carry on our shoulders. I mean, it's ridiculous if you think about it. What other species has to pay for water, which is not even quality water? It's quantitatively, it might be okay, but it's been chemically treated with who knows what. And when you think of what goes down a toilet, yeah. Yeah, so, and then you've got to pay to eat, you've got to pay mortgage or rent or whatever, and that's before you even start living. It's ridiculous. It is all about boundaries, and if you can't accept your rules in your house, and if you want a quiet day, and when you're working, then you're entitled to have a quiet day. This is the beauty of this place. It's like, I've got that today. It's wonderful. And I had a dream. I saw flowing water in the creek, which it makes me cry, and it's like, I'm feeling so guilty walking past these orange trees, but that straight away there's a thing, I'm feeling guilty. So why am I feeling guilty? I can only do so much. I'd love to give more water to everything, but at the moment it's having to ration it and just prioritise and stagger the watering as and when, like tomato plants need it. Then it's give them little and often. I suppose like eating really, it's the plant equivalent. The same as planting anything. The roots and the seed and have room to spread out. Because all three of us have made the same mistake here. It's like melons and squashes are supposed to be about 4 foot apart, but when they put one between those, they're still 2 foot apart. But of course, when they grow and spread, so it's all a big learning curve. Because consequently, the roots haven't got room to manoeuvre when they're all squashed together. Ironically, they're called squashes as well. And it's like us. Nobody wants to be herded into a city and piled up in a tower block. I can't think of anything worse, totally out of contact with nature. But nature has been, I'd say, better than YouTube. What it's revealed and shown to me, just observing things. I mean, and you've had some fantastic. You had that robin come in the bathroom, I seem to remember, and you mentioned one the other day, and then you sent me that video. I think it was a pigeon. I can't remember the bird now. But that's beautiful signs to get. And the hornet, that's another good one. I remember that one. You mentioned that one as well. So yeah, that's. I'd say, well, the feeling I get is things are looking. The way to see life is not just have a to-do list, have a done list. So whatever point you get to, there's always that feeling like I need to be doing more. I need to find out more about this. But then consider a week ago, a month ago, a year ago, and how much you've spiritually grown. And then that balances out and you think, actually, yeah, I may feel like I've still got this to go, but look how far I've come already. Yeah, I meant to say as well, I appreciate, I know you were struggling when you very kindly let me stay with you, and I was going through sort of financial difficulties and things at the time. And then I needed that hermit year to sort of go inward and face myself, and because I could have Julia. She said I was the first one she invited here, but it turns out that the previous place she just decided to start this community. She hadn't asked the guy whose land it is, so there's all these people turning up. So I can understand his point of view, and you've got a reflection there, because Julia was moaning about Dom would wreck her cars, let them run out of fuel or whatever. But she does that as well. That's one of the reasons I made that video on driving and taking responsibility, and that it's a big thing with people when they've got to admit to themselves that they're either too elderly or some physical reason why they shouldn't really be driving, but it's like, it's like you've cut my legs off if I haven't got a car, because I've got so used, it becomes like a pair of old slippers. It's like the same with mobile phones. There was a time when there wasn't such things, and there was a time in everybody's life where they didn't have a car and had to walk. But it's because they've got used to it, a bit of planning. I mean, I found out, because of having to do something with PayPal, that my driving license ran out 2 years ago, 2021. It's the photo side of it. But I ain't going to bother. It's another thing, I cut a tie with the system. So passport runs out in 2025, and I doubt I'll be going back to the UK between now and then. And fuck it, I'm living illegally, as it were, in what would be classed as a condemned, well, not a condemned building. It's an agricultural building, so it's not legal to live in it. But fuck it, who cares? It's like, keep your legalities the other side of the hill. It's like, I'm not doing anything to draw attention to myself. We're not having wild parties or anything, not causing a nuisance. So, in some ways, we just don't exist here, which is how I like it. And it's so beautiful. and so peaceful here. Anyway, I wish you a wonderful day, and love to you and to Mickey, and onwards and upwards.